Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epic Times that gives you insights beyond the headlines. Now, as always, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps get our show out to more people. It really helps us a lot, actually. But look, folks, the tariffs, they are back. Almost. The 90-day pause, new tariff deadline, not too far out. It's on August 1st. And that's where the interim stage, where most countries are paying just, 10% tariff, still pretty high. That's coming to an end, and they're going to start paying much, much higher tariffs after that date. President Trump has now issued letters to several international leaders, which he posted publicly, announcing the new tariff rates with the new deadline. And with this, Trump is also detailing what he wants all of this to lead to for the country. Now, Epic Times said this. It said President Donald Trump sent another round of letters to several heads of state on July 9th outlining the new U.S. tariff rates their countries will face starting on August 1st. And in those letters also stating that if they decide to reciprocate the tariffs, we will match the reciprocation and raise the tariffs. Now, it notes that Trump posted these on Truth Social, and the president called out 8 countries all throughout the day, including BRICS founding member nation, Brazil. And meanwhile, Algeria, Iraq, Libya, Sri Lanka will each be charged a 30% tariff. Brunei, Moldova will face a 25% tariff, and the Philippines will face a 20% tariff. All letters threatened higher tariffs on goods transshipped in the hopes of avoiding the new costs. Meaning, don't mislabel your products, don't send them here and try to get lower tariffs. We will catch you, is what Trump is saying. Now, notice that Trump's letters are nearly identical to the ones sent to 14 other countries, including Japan, South Korea, and Thailand, and a lot of others this week, where they're all being told that they're going to have to start paying pretty high tariffs. Now, look, these tariffs are kind of the same as the previous ones. The new deadline of August 1st seems like it will be a hard deal with Trump. He wrote on Truth Social, as per letters sent to various countries yesterday, in addition to letters that will be sent today, tomorrow, and for the next short period of time, tariffs will start being paid on August 1st, 2025. That's when we expect the money to roll in. And he said there has been no change to this date, and there will be no change. In other words, all money will be due and payable starting August 1st, 2025. No extensions will be granted. All that is done. He's not going to extend it again, he's saying. And he said, thank you all for your attention to this matter. Now, the tariff rates, they vary country to country. Most kind of hang between 20 and 35%. Some countries are getting hit a whole lot harder. Some are paying like upwards of 40%. We'll see if there's more than that. One country that's going to be very heavily affected is Brazil. Trump is saying Brazil will be charged a 50% tariff on all of its goods imported once the August 1st deadline hits. And the reason, well, he said free speech, which they're restricting in Brazil. Trump wrote in the letter to the Brazilian government that this tariff rate is, quote, due in part to Brazil's insidious attacks on free elections and the fundamental free speech rights of Americans, as lately illustrated by the Brazilian Supreme Court, which has issued hundreds of secret and unlawful censorship orders to U.S. social media platforms, threatening them with millions of dollars in fines and eviction from the Brazilian social media market. On that point, they've actually been even censoring Americans, people who are living in the United States, and even some Brazilian expats here. Trump also called out the treatment of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro in the letter, and he said that the way the country is treating Bolsonaro is an international disgrace. And remember, as just some context, Bolsonaro, he's currently on trial for an alleged coup plot to overthrow the nation's 2022 election results, and they're saying that he wanted to assassinate the current president, Lula da Silva, which he has denied doing. And alongside these also, it also brings up another issue. The United States is now also collecting a lot of money from the tariffs, which Trump says will be collecting more in full on August 1st. It's billions and billions, as Trump might say. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he said so far they brought in around $100 billion, and they expect that to reach $300 billion just by the end of this year. Meaning they plan on making a lot of money from the brand new tariffs. But even aside from that cash flow to the U.S. Treasury, Trump also explained he has a bigger vision on what these tariffs are going to lead to, all that money, right? This was him during a multilateral meeting yesterday. Watch.
Well, bigger than the tariffs actually are the fact that when you charge the tariffs at a certain point, they say, well, we can't pay those tariffs. It doesn't make economic sense. These are wealthy countries, and they or their companies will come into our country and build, and that's what's actually happening. If you had a very low tariff, there'd be no incentive to do that. If you have no tariff, like we used to have, which is so stupid, it's not even believable, but then obviously they make their product, the product in their country. They have the jobs, they have the income, they have the taxes, they have everything, and they just send it into us, and it's jobs that we wouldn't get. Now the wheel is turned, and what we're doing is more important, we're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars, money that we've never seen before. But more important than that, we have a lot of people that would rather not have to pay that, so they're coming in and they're building plants.
Now, this does seem to be a big part of the plan, to use tariffs to push companies to bring their manufacturing to the United States. And with that, the return of the American factory, right? The return of the American economy. And Trump goes on to note a few other pieces with this. A factory is not just an isolated entity. When some people think about factories, they just think manufacturing jobs. Each factory actually has a lot of other jobs tied in with it. Logistics, marketing, resources, R&D, and so on. But Trump also brought up something else that some people might not consider. That's energy. Something we often don't think about with factories. They need something to power them, and they use a lot of energy. And every factory, well, they need to build something. Trump wants to expand the energy industry to also support all the brand new manufacturing. And he even noted that in countries like China, this is the case. He said sometimes they'll even build a coal plant just to support a factory. Trump seems to like that idea quite a bit. And now they cleared the way for this with the big, beautiful bill. Remember, they got rid of the carbon taxes. They got rid of some of the taxes that were preventing the construction or profitable construction of new energy plants. They cleared a lot of the restrictions, and they got rid of these subsidies on solar panels and wind turbines. So good old fossil fuels are making a comeback. Now, in other news also, USAID has drawn to a close, but the legacy of USAID, it will carry on. And recent documents actually suggest the Agency for International Development, not an aid organization, but for international development. It turns out some of that development involved shipping virus samples to the controversial Wuhan Biolab. Daily Caller said this: the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, shipped thousands of viral samples to a lab in Wuhan over the course of a 10-year program, even though it had no formal agreement with the lab in place, according to previously unreported documents. It says the documents show that USAID funded the exportation of 11,000 samples from Yunnan province, where some of the closest relatives of the COVID-19 virus circulate, to Wuhan, the epicenter of the pandemic, with no apparent plan for ensuring the samples were not misdirected to bioweapons and remain accessible to the U.S. government. Now, the report goes on to note this was tied in with a $210 million USAID public health program that was called PREDICT, as in predict the next pandemic kind of thing. It was also steered by the University of California, Davis, and guess where the samples went to? They went to none other than the infamous Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is also tied to the Chinese Communist Party's military. Now, also, Trump announced his administration has closed USAID, and going forward, it's been suggested the State Department's going to pick up that slack. Remember, one of the first things they did after Doge went and kind of wrecked shop in USAID, they put the agency under the State Department. Now they folded it. The State Department's probably going to oversee most foreign aid. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S., all of our foreign aid now will need to reflect U.S. interests. So maybe the interest of the U.S. will not be funding like transsexual Broadway plays and so on like that. which is some of what they were doing. They also changed the logos of various aid organizations to the American flag because they wanted countries to know who gave it to them, right? Now, on another topic, though, Congress is investigating concerns over the decline in former President Joe Biden's health. And was this covered up? Why was the American public not being told about what was happening? I'll be talking more about this after a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, don't forget to support us by hitting the like button and let me know what you think of the show in the comments. Now look, Congress is investigating concerns over the decline in former President Joe Biden's mental health and whether this was all covered up. Why were they not telling us about his health decline? Now they called in his former doctor to testify before Congress, and the doctor, well, it's being reported that he pleaded the fifth. No comment, sir. I plead the fifth. New York Post said this: Joe Biden's former doctor refused to answer a single question Wednesday about the ex-president's health and cognitive decline, stunningly invoking his right against self-incrimination before slinking out of a congressional deposition. Dr. Kevin O'Connor is facing claims that he shielded the public from Biden's decline while the 46th president was in office. Shielded to some people, I should say. And it says, and even covered up his powerful patient's advanced stage prostate cancer. That was a pretty serious one, by the way. Now, notes that according to O'Connell, Biden's longtime personal physician, was asked two key questions. Were you ever told to lie about the president's health? Good question. Did somebody tell you to lie about this? Did you ever believe President Biden was unfit to execute his duties? Very good question. A simple no would have been nice, but in both instances it said O'Connor took the fifth. I plead the fifth, Judge. No comment on that. And notes the only question the doctor answered before the deposition concluded was confirming his name, according to an oversight spokesperson who pointed out that doctor-patient privilege would have allowed the witness to answer at least some questions. Now look, technically, you are allowed to plead the fifth. That is your right under the Constitution. And the Fifth Amendment says you cannot be forced to incriminate yourself. You don't have to. You can even just choose to stay silent. That's your right to remain silent. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. And doing that, invoking the fifth, it doesn't mean you're guilty or anything like that, but it does tend to have a bad optic, as you can see in the way the media is reacting to this. A lot of them are like, it doesn't look good. Now, in terms of Congress, though, the investigations are part of something bigger. The Trump administration, they are raising questions about Biden's alleged cognitive decline. Maybe not even, I think it's known now, right? Since this could also raise questions of whether this was being covered up. Were they being told? Was this a strategy? Were they told to lie to people about it? We don't know. Was somebody else usurping the powers of the president by taking advantage of the circumstance? That's a big part of it. In fact, that's something Trump is kind of alleging right now, right? Who was running the auto pen? Because that is a big part of the controversy with the auto pen, the machine they were using to sign Biden's name on documents, some of which Biden seemed to not remember signing, by the way, meaning, well, did he forget or did somebody else do it? Now, this is still being investigated, and so we'll see if we get more answers on it, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about it. Now, speaking of investigations, though, the FBI is now allegedly investigating its own former director, as well as former CIA Director John Brennan. Fox News said that former CIA Director John Brennan and former FBI Director James Comey are under criminal investigation for potential wrongdoing related to the Trump-Russia probe. In other words, the Trump-Russia conspiracy that was funded and put together through opposition research, paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC at the time. They, of course, went through a company that hired a former British spy who then went to unverified Russian sources and then posted unverified Russian disinformation and spread it throughout the entire government and the media and the intelligence agencies and used it to investigate Trump and tried to remove him from office and then spread it to the media, which then lied to the public about it, which then impacted the elections and resulted in, well, efforts to remove the sitting president from office, all based on false information. And look, when it comes to the potential investigations and charges on this, they're also looking into them allegedly making false statements to Congress. That would be a very minor crime, lying to Congress, compared to what could come out from this. And they say they're citing this to Justice Department sources telling it to Fox News Digital. So anonymous sources take it for what it is, right? It notes this, so it says CIA Director John Ratcliffe referred evidence of wrongdoing by Brennan to FBI Director Kash Patel for potential prosecution. DOJ sources told Fox News Digital. And it said the sources said that the referral was received and told Fox News Digital a criminal investigation into Brennan was opened and is underway. DOJ sources declined to provide further details. It is unclear at this point if the investigation spans beyond his alleged false statements to Congress. As for Comey, DOJ sources told Fox News Digital that an investigation into the former director is underway, but could not share details of what specifically is being probed. Now look, it notes at least, according to these unnamed sources, the investigation relates to a quote-unquote conspiracy, meaning they conspired, not that they're talking about wearing tinfoil hats and aliens, right? A conspiracy to do something. Again, this is rumor. You could say this is a conspiracy. But they also note that neither agency, neither individual responded to Fox for comment. Personally, I'd say this story, again, it's according to unnamed sources. We can't verify anything. We don't know if any of this is actually happening. It might just be rumor. It might be people leaking stuff to the public for some reason. Normally, if people are being investigated like this, you don't want to announce it. You don't want to talk about it. So we'll see. Maybe this is just a political stunt. And on the other side of the aisle, remember, Trump has accused them of weaponizing justice. They're accusing Trump of weaponizing justice. So believe which side you want, right? Now, there is speculation also, though. This could have something to do with the whole falsified Russiagate investigation. That's the rumor right now. That would be one of the many, many conspiracies that did, in fact, undermine Trump's first term in office. But again, look, this is all speculation right now. So there's really not much on it aside from unverified media articles. So we'll see. 2 more weeks, as they say, right? Now, on another topic, the Department of Justice is suing the state of California for violating Title IX. And that's the civil rights law that prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or education program if they get money from the government, from the federal government. So if you get that money, there's strings attached. You can't discriminate. Department of Justice said this. They say the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division today filed suit to enforce Title IX and protect California female student athletes from unfair competition and reckless endangerment by male participation on female high school sports teams. It says, according to the complaint, the California Department of Education, the CDE, and the California Interscholastic Federation, CIF, have engaged in illegal sex discrimination against female student athletes by allowing, it says, males to compete against them, depriving these girls of the equal education and athletic opportunities afforded to them by the federal civil rights law. Thus, the suit seeks declaratory injunctive and damage relief for violations of Title IX, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in any education program or activity that receives federal funding. Now look, when it comes to men being able to compete in women's sports, if they identify as trans, they can identify as a woman, they can identify as a tree person, a cat, anything. But specifically the ones who identify as women were allowed to compete against men. I don't know about the other ones. But this brought up a lot of other issues. Biologically speaking, men develop muscle a lot easier, whether you like it or not. Some men. They also tend to be larger than women. And so this is a reason why there are separate sports teams for men and for women. If you put men in women's sports, it causes a lot of problems. One of them is a man in a woman's dressing room, which can be a little controversial. It also includes women getting injured, like getting in a boxing match and breaking their jaw or giving them a concussion. There were actually a lot of cases of that. And even aside from that, the policies are being accused of impacting the careers and opportunities that these girls might have had. They could have missed out on scholarships, for example, sports scholarships. Maybe they really wanted to do it, but they were afraid for their safety, or they didn't feel comfortable changing in front of a man in the locker rooms. Some would even regard that as a form of sexual harassment, notably. And so there are a lot of problems that come up through this by extension. But I would say that's also the irony of identity politics, right? You really can't prop up one group without impacting others. As Thomas Sowell would say, you want to have, you want to take from one person to give to another. It's from whom and to whom. If you want to manufacture equity, right, equality of outcome, it means you need to tear down one person to build up another. And if you're tearing down one person or harming one person, you are doing the very thing you claim to be fixing through the very act of doing that. Programs that would give preferential treatment to someone based on race or gender or whatever else would also mean it would negatively impact other races or other genders. And you see that, unfortunately. Again, I think everybody wants to be nice to everyone, some people do at least, but to manufacture it artificially, you're usually going to harm someone by doing so. When it comes to the federal government's laws on trans issues, I think California, they could probably argue that under the Biden administration, trans females would have been considered female, even though they were biologically men, because of the way the federal government was treating it. One important thing the Trump administration did, Trump redefined gender, or you could say redefined gender. Because under the previous administration, gender identity was legally regarded as gender. That was the case under the Biden administration. What Trump did through executive action is he said the federal government only recognizes two genders, male and female, which is whatever you're born with at the time of your birth, right? You can't change it, is what they're saying. And so when the Trump administration redefined federally the definition of gender, or again, redefined it, because you could say it's what it's been through most of human history, that also had legal implications. Because when you talk about the inability of schools to, again, under Title IX, to discriminate based on gender, under the current administration, where only male and female are recognized, to allow a man to compete against women would be a violation of that. But under the previous laws, where again they regarded gender identity as gender, that would have been under the laws of the previous administration. So I think that'll be California's legal argument. It doesn't necessarily stand up very well as an ethical argument, and I think a lot of that will be brought up as well, but we'll see. Now, meanwhile, the Trump administration is taking on the high costs of prescription drugs. Why do we pay so much for medication? And HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is telling us why. He just posted an update on this plan. Watch this.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
Hey, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary, and today we met with patients from all over the country who have been facing the challenge of paying for their drug prices.
I estimate that I've spent over $180,000 out of pocket just on this one drug.
$9,000 per month that's not an option for me.
I cashed in all of my savings. And at times I worked 3 jobs in order to make ends meet.
This is not something that should be happening in the United States of America. On average, we pay about 300 to 400% larger. In some cases, we pay 10, 12, 13 times what other countries pay for the exact same drug that's made by the exact same factory in New Jersey or some other state.
No American should go bankrupt because of drug prices, and I'm really tremendously proud to be part of an administration that's finally going to do something about that.
And I am encouraged that this administration is boldly and courageously looking to help patients like me.
We're in negotiations right now with the pharmaceutical companies, and we are going to pay the same at the end of this as people pay in Europe and other nations. It's the only fair way to do it, and it's the only humane thing and compassionate thing that we can do for Americans.
Now, remember on that topic, President Trump recently issued an executive order to reduce the high costs of medications, and that includes making companies give Americans most favored nation status, at least among developed nations, when it comes to how much they charge. And so it also raises concerns, right? It raises the point. Americans, we've apparently been subsidizing the low costs of pharmaceutical drugs for other countries. The low cost of pharmaceuticals in Canada and Europe, apparently it's because companies have been tacking on the costs of research and development on Americans while giving very low prices basically everywhere else. So in addition to shouldering the defense budgets and trading at a loss and getting fined and tariffed and everything else, we were also supplying their entire socialized medicine programs. What this also means is that while the cost of medication, because of Trump's order, they might go down here, it probably also means they're going to go up in other countries as the markets do this. And they pick up the slack of what Americans apparently have been paying this whole time. And we mostly didn't know this was happening. Now, also on a related point, though, RFK Jr. is working on revamping the system of compensation for vaccine injuries. A big topic for a lot of people right now. Epic Times said this: federal officials are working on revamping the program that provides compensation for people who suffer injuries from vaccines. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said on June 30th. Now, as we all know, nobody ever gets injured by vaccines, right? We're not allowed to say otherwise. But it says here the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which they established for some reason as part of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, that law also granted vaccine manufacturers immunity from lawsuits, which we assume they do not need because, as we know, there's never any problems with this. They don't need immunity from lawsuits, but they were given it for no reason, apparently. Right? Now, notice that under the program, injury claims are lodged with judges who decide whether to grant payouts after hearing from petitioners and the government. Department of Justice attorneys representing the Department of Health and Human Services, the department Kennedy heads often present evidence opposing the claims. Now look, being serious, right? The issue with vaccine injuries, people have limited ability to actually do anything about it. The companies themselves, they're given immunity. They have legal immunity, at least on that. So there's a special court set up specifically for these lawsuits. And when they do decide someone has been injured, the payout comes from a surcharge that they put on the vaccines. And because they put the vaccines in the vaccine schedules, they basically just make the American people pay for the payouts when somebody is injured or provably injured. Now, the COVID vaccine, that's going to be a whole other issue, though, because a few things on that. With the COVID vaccines, the injury claims on those, they go through a different system. They go through a program called the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program. But they've now updated those shots with warning labels for high risk of myocarditis, heart inflammation, which if you've been watching Crossroads for a while, you know that we've talked about that, even when we were told that we weren't supposed to talk about it. But apparently there's a high risk of the very thing that we've been warning about. On that point, even aside from the completely safe and effective messaging, 100% safe and effective, as you were all told, for a lot of people, the vaccines were mandatory. So you didn't really have a choice. Now, they would argue you always had a choice. You could have gotten fired from your job or not been able to travel or had your kid not go to school and maybe had the government take your kids from you for putting them at risk. You had a choice. Some would say that, well, that wasn't a very good set of choices you gave me there. And so a lot of people got the shots even when they didn't want to, right? Even if it went against their beliefs, they still got them, a lot of people. So with that in context, the claims on that could actually come in because of those issues, that they were forcibly vaccinated. A lot of people think that they had to do it. They didn't have a choice, right? Now look, in other news though, something else I've been saying for years has yet again been proven true. The Chinese government, the Chinese regime, the CCP, they're a key force behind the drug trade. They're kind of they're the ringleaders of the cartels. They supply the chemicals, the synthetic drugs, the precursors. They have many programs with the cartels, even with the narco-terror groups, which they sometimes even train in China. And the Chinese Communist Party, well, they also do the money laundering through Chinese mafia organizations, which are tied to the CCP through the United Front. And now guess what? Chinese nationals are pleading guilty for what? Well, for laundering money for the drug trade. The very thing we've been saying is happening for years. Epoch Times said this: 2 Chinese nationals and a New Yorker pleaded guilty to money laundering charges involving drug trafficking proceeds. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of North Carolina announced on July 7th, Fang Enhua, 38, and Liu Jianfei, 30, both from China, along with Zhen Shu Jun, 36, of Staten Island, New York, were members of a Chinese money laundering organization, which apparently has the acronym CMLO, that laundered more than $92 million in illicit drug proceeds, primarily through Mexico. Now, on that point, we've seen a lot of arrests of alleged CCP agents lately, actually quite a few. Even this week, they even arrested a Chinese hacker, finally. And these arrests, they also suggest to the Trump administration they're following the money on the drug trade, so to speak. And guess what? A lot of the money ties back to the Chinese Communist Party and also to the Chinese banks. And some have even suggested they might consider sanctioning some of the Chinese banks that have allowed that to happen. We'll see where this goes. Is this the beginning or the end? I'd say it's the tip of the iceberg either way, but at least they're starting to go down it, right? That said, folks, questions, comments, let me know what you think in the comments, and let's jump into some discussions. Seymour Butts, you're saying, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. That is actually true. I think if you don't have principles, you'll be easily swayed by anything. That is very true, actually. Paul Navante, you're saying diversity, equity, and exclusion. Yeah, maybe that could be the new one. DEE, diversity, equity, and exclusion, as opposed to a DEI, inclusion, right? Well, and that's again the ironic part of it. Look, it's actually kind of funny because people say that wasn't real socialism, that wasn't real communism, that was Stalinism or Leninism or Maoism or fascism or whatever. All these different ideas based on the same principles. But it's always, you take from one group and you give it to another. You rob one person and you redistribute it, right? From those most capable to those least, typically is the way it works. Now, on that point, the debates on this go back to like even the French Revolution. Great book, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. What did he say? When the French Revolution leaders declared their ideology, right, which was, liberty, equality, fraternity, right? Liberty, equality, fraternity. Who doesn't believe that would be great? We can be free, and we could have equality, and we would have fraternity. Everybody would be friends. And they friendly introduced them to the guillotine and to cannonballs, and they introduced them to frozen rivers, which they sank them into as an act of fraternity. But when it came to equity, right, fraternity, equality, Frederick Bastiat noted you can't actually have both of those. You can't be free and unfree at the same time. Because look, if you want to facilitate equality, you cannot do that unless you take away the achievers and give it to the overachievers and give it to the underachievers. You can't create equality without tearing one person down. So, what is equality? You have 5 Oreos here, and you have 2 Oreos here. How do you create equality when there's 5 Oreos in this stack and 2 in this stack? Well, you create equality by taking some of those Oreos off and putting them there and then shoving one into your pocket like a good communist, right? And so that's how you create equality under their ideologies. Meaning, you can't have freedom with that. That very act goes against the freedom of the individual. So these are incompatible. You cannot have both. It has always been an inherent contradiction within the movement, which for some reason over the past, 250 years, close to, I guess more than that, they still haven't learned what people were saying back then over and over again. And here we are repeating the same mistakes, right? Judy Akeem, you're saying, that's an overstatement, Josh. Most pharma is not R&D companies, but others producing patents that become public, exactly to avoid the cost of R&D. That's an important point. You're saying the R&D budget is just an excuse they use to charge you more. It's just the companies having no shame. You're right. I should be more clear on that. Great point on this is the fact that a lot of medications are actually beyond the reach of patents. And so what a lot of drug companies do is they make minor alterations, re-register it, and then grab back the patent to prevent it from becoming a low-cost drug. A lot of people, as an example of that, they point to penicillin. One of the reasons why penicillin is so cheap, it is outside of the patents. And some would also suggest this is why some alternative treatments are not taken seriously through the medical establishment. It's because it's not profitable. There's not a lot of money in it. And so they say, that's superstitious. That's not good for business. And everybody plays the game because a lot of people get money through it. The whole establishment with that, unfortunately. Sandy Sefkick, you're saying, and how are those tariffs benefiting us commoners? Good question. We're not supposed to ask. Next question. No, I'm just joking. All right, so how are the tariffs benefiting us commoners? If you're outside the United States, they're not. If you're in other countries, they're going to probably make life kind of hard. And this is a reality. This is something that should be addressed. And some people are probably really unhappy with Trump for doing it. Some countries, the current way that they run, will not be able to sustain itself with these new tariffs. Canada, for example, you might remember Justin Trudeau when Trump was talking about what are comparatively pretty low tariffs. It was like 25% or 35%. Like a lot of countries are getting hit with 35% now. Like what was considered a high tariff at that time is now like the norm. Justin Trudeau went and met with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and according to Trump, when he was publicly making fun of him and calling him the governor of California, Justin Trudeau was saying that Canada would not survive that type of tariff. Like, you know, again, is that a nice thing to do? Probably not. You know, if you wanted to have a soft landing with those types of policies, you'd have to give these countries like 4 years. You can't do that in the United States because you have a new president and the next president might just take it off the table. But you would need to give them time to rebuild trade networks with other countries. You would need to give them time to establish domestic trade operations. One problem Canada has is even between different provinces, they tariff each other. So they tariff America, then they tariff themselves between provinces, and that makes it hard for them to trade. It would be like if in the United States, like Texas tariffed New York. I don't know if they do, but it would be like that. And what that does is it prevents or reduces internal trade. And when you're dealing with countries that they don't have as big of economies, that creates a lot of problems, right? I'm using Canada as one example of this, but for a lot of countries, that's the case. Now, for a lot of countries, their economies are already not doing very well. You know, there was a lot of accusations when Biden was president. People saying, oh, the economy is terrible. It's the dollar's doing terrible. The whole world was doing terrible in terms of the economy. The whole world was doing terrible. If you want to look at the entire world, even though I would say the felt economy was not very good in America, we were doing better than most of the rest of the world. Just to emphasize that a lot of economies right now, even with all of the other things they have, even with fines on American companies, everything else, they're barely sustainable. Most countries are barely sustainable economically. And so if you take a barely sustainable system and you pull the rug out from under them, they're going to fall. And so what you're going to have happen probably, look, let's use Europe for an example. You have countries now saying they have to pay 5% GDP for defense, for NATO. Why was that not happening before? Some countries were, but why was it not happening before? Because of I think it's because of their EU membership, European Union membership. They're not allowed to have a certain degree of deficit. And so the issue was they could not pay 5% without going into a deficit, meaning now that they're forced to pay 5% GDP on that issue alone, they're going to have a deficit, meaning it's not sustainable. It's not economically sustainable. Now, if you take that, where their economies are no longer sustainable, right? And then you add the fact that they have to pay more for pharmaceuticals. And a lot of them have socialized medicine where taxpayer money funds that. It means the money is going to go not as far, meaning they're going to either need more money for it or they need to start excluding people or mating them, as some would say. One of those two, for the good of the country, folks. Do it for the good of the people. And then also you're going to have the issue on top of all of that where they lose a lot of their industry. They have to pay more for goods. When they sell goods, they're less competitive because America used to buy a lot of it and we just don't buy as much. Meaning you're probably going to have some big economic problems even on the trade front. What does that mean for the governments? If they have to use money for healthcare and military, that doesn't work. They don't make enough money. They have an option. They could collect more through taxes, but if the company's already being tariffed, they can't really do that. They're either going to push the companies out while Trump's waving them in, come on in, the water's fine, no tariffs on this side of the ocean. Trump's doing this, you $1 million and you can buy a gold card. You want to become an American, for $5 million? Trump's doing this. You might have a lot of them take it. And so you could say good for America, but horrible for these other countries. It's gonna hurt a lot of countries. Being serious, what does that mean? It means that for a lot of these countries that are facing this problem now, it will probably be the case that their social welfare systems are not sustainable. They will probably have to get rid of socialized medicine, probably. They will probably have to not give free handouts to people like they have been. And for a lot of countries, that's going to cause a lot of, that will probably have a ripple effect where it starts causing crisis or internal disputes with the large migrant populations, because a lot of them are on the welfare systems, especially in quite a few countries in Europe. And so they're going to face a crisis. They're going to face a crisis. Now, on America's side, who do those tariffs benefit for us commoners? Well, Trump is saying he wants to use it to get rid of federal income tax. He wants to use the money from tariffs to replace income tax. And so we'll see how that works. That used to be the way the American tax system worked. We didn't even have federal income tax until after the Civil War. And that was briefly, they put them back, they removed them briefly, then put them back on early 1900s. We could go back to that. We might go back to that. Now that might also mean you pay more for imports. But what we've seen so far with the markets, we have not actually seen any real rise in the cost of goods despite the tariffs. Even a lot of the media that were warning that was going to happen, they've had to admit that it did not happen. So, good for America, not very good for a lot of other places. But it will force social change in other countries. Look, on a whole top tier level, this could be the end of socialist policies in most of the world, because they will not be financially sustainable. That could be what happens, depending on how they navigate it. Denise B., you're saying, actually, as the good communist, you take all the cookies. Then the ones who had any cookies are now equal having no cookies. Yeah, okay, back to my analogy, the 5 cookies or the 2 cookies. It is true that most communist countries would merely kill the holder of these cookies and take all 5 cookies and then maybe make this one get in a cookie line, and then you take its cookies as well and then give them some crumbs of the cookies you took from them, because it's for the good of the people, right? Emotion 007, you're saying, why do we keep on doing stupid things like this with China? It's just mind-boggling to me. You're talking about us apparently paying money to help move 11,000 virus samples from Yunnan province to Hunan province. Why would we do that? Good question. Hopefully we get some answers on it, because I think a lot of Americans are very unhappy with what we're finding out. It's controversial because, look, if you go back to the beginning of COVID, if you talked about China, origins of the virus, or programs relating to gain-of-function research or cooperation between the labs, they would silence you. Take it from someone who knows. Because as you might remember, I did that big documentary right at the beginning of COVID where I talked about virus origins and gain-of-function research. They went after me crazily. I got massively censored for daring to talk about something that was not only true, but I think common knowledge by this point. I don't think anything I had in that has been disproven, even though at first they said I was spreading disinformation. Everything I had in there has since been proven to be true. But they will try to silence you if you talk about it. Maybe I do think that's changing now. I think it has changed, and I think people want answers on it. And I think they should also eventually demand answers on why they were silencing people who were trying to tell you about it. John Reinbold, you're saying, Josh, I am having trouble finding USA-made items. Me too. You're saying, and I was reading that Chinese items come through other countries. Maybe it is time to buy less and barter more. Yeah, well, and that's actually one of the big problems in this interim stage of the tariffs. What's the interim stage? As Trump has been discussing, his long-term vision for tariffs is to not ever have them go away, first off. Maybe renegotiate them if countries reduce their tariffs on American-made goods, which means we need to make stuff here. But the vision of it is twofold. Maintain tariffs, use tariffs from other countries to subsidize or replace the need for income tax for most Americans. You're not going to see that probably this tax cycle. You might see it next tax cycle if it happens. And then the other plan is use tariffs to incentivize the return of American manufacturing. And for a lot of retailers, that's been the issue. So Walmart, Amazon, the challenge they're having is that products they sell, well, you now have what is from the tariffs, at least from them or from the manufacturers, an additional surcharge on imports. Now, tariffs, they technically are a tax on imports. And that is paid for by the person doing the import, right? If you do go back in time and the arguments when America got rid of when we created federal income tax, this was around it was a debate that happened around 1910 to 1913 or something. Around then, right? It was in that time frame. The argument was we could have a very small income tax that would lower the cost of goods. And for Americans who at that point were not paying income tax at all, they're like, it doesn't sound so bad. I can buy this penny house for half a penny, or I'm exaggerating, but that was kind of the way the thinking was, right? It was sold to people that if you get rid of tariffs and you replace that with an income tax, you're going to have to pay a little more if you make more money. We're just going to tax the wealthy, same narrative, but it meant that the average person would pay less for groceries or something like that. That didn't. You can judge for yourself how well that worked, right? But that was the argument. Anyways, the point is, back to Walmart and other big companies, the challenge they have now from the tariffs is there's an additional surcharge effectively being put on them. Now, Trump has argued the companies need to eat the additional cost because they made out like bandits through COVID. A lot of their competition went out of business. Even without that, online shopping went through the roof during COVID. So a lot of these online retailers, if you look at their stocks, they've been like this. Now, that doesn't mean the average person has done very well, but the stock market's done fantastic. And if you look at look at like a 10-year chart on the stock market for these companies, they're like this, and they're worried they're going to go here. Not here, but here, right? And people are saying, look, before COVID, you guys were here, not here. So eat those charges and don't try to put those charges on us so you can stay up here. You made out very well through what was the destruction of your competition because, essential worker policies, but you know what? You can't charge everybody else more because you want to make your shareholders happy. And so that's been kind of the debate with it, right? So back to that point though, the way that a lot of these companies are trying to get around the issue that they've gone from here to here is they're actually having programs to rebuild American manufacturing. Walmart, I know I kind of singled them out on this. They've actually started a Made in America initiative. And so they're looking for American, Made in America companies. They're looking for Made in America products. They're noting that unfortunately there are not Made in America options for a lot of the things that people might want to buy. But they're looking for it. And where they can't find it, there are companies trying to build it. That might take a year. That might even take 2 years. Even that would be a very fast time frame. But there is a very aggressive effort right now to rebuild the Made in America product line, to get that rolling again. In the meantime, I like bartering. I like the idea of bartering. So maybe that could be the option in the meantime. Realitysreal.com, you're saying, it seems ironic that freedom often costs more than anything else. Yeah, it is. And it's easily lost, by the way. Easily lost and very hard to get back when you lose it. Take history as an example. Every time an emergency is put in place that eliminates certain freedoms, once the emergency is over, you very, very rarely see those freedoms be given back. It is very easy to lose freedom. It is very hard to get it back once it's lost. And so if you don't stand by it and protect it and guard it and value it, you do risk losing it. It's always only, it's been said, right? It's only one generation away. A free country is only ever one generation away from tyranny. And so you need to make sure you teach your kids right. You need to make sure that there's a line and you maintain that line, right? You got to have proper boundaries when it comes to your freedoms. And again, if you don't defend it, you will lose it. Defend it nicely, right? But yeah, the founding fathers would agree that it's easily lost, and so you really do need to treasure it. All right, everyone. That said, I'm going to be at Turning Point this weekend down in Florida. So I'll be speaking at SAS, a Student Action Summit, on Saturday in Tampa, in Florida. So if anybody's going to be at SAS, be sure to say hi. Also, again, don't forget to tune in tomorrow. We're going to have our primetime show. I've been back, so I've been on it again. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot of fun doing that show, so make sure to check it out. And I have some good stuff in the works. Now, I mentioned before, I'm not doing my normal Crossroads shows on Fridays anymore because I'm now working on a second show, or you can say a third show if you count primetime. But this one's going to be focused on features and investigations. And we will have updates on that soon because we've just recorded the first episode. It's going to take a little bit to process it and so on, but just to let you all know, that is moving, and I have some great stuff planned for that. That one's going to be a bit slower because it's features and investigations. But I'm using my Fridays now to work on that. So again, I'll let you know when we have some updates on it, but so there's some really good stuff in the works right now. That said, everyone, please don't forget to like this video. Tell a friend or family member about Crossroads if you can. And that said, enjoy your weekend. I will see y'all on Monday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.